I'm Kailey, Leinz, an anchor with Bloomberg Television in New York, and I'm joined now in conversation by Darius Adamczyk. He is CEO and chairman of Honeywell for a conversation about technology and sustainability. He joins us now for the Bloomberg Sustainability Summit with a focus on finance. So Darius, it's great to talk to you, and we'll get into the specifics of what you're doing internally at Honeywell. But first, I want to talk about the businesses that you serve, your customers, and what demand is looking like at this point for you for some of the sustainable solutions that Honeywell offers.
First of all, Kailey, nice to be here with you and have a chat again. Overall, I would say the markets look remarkably strong. I mean, it's been this is a year where the demand is not our problem. Frankly, as we look across our markets, whether it be our PMT, our energy-oriented businesses, which are doing extraordinarily well, some of our short-cycle businesses, such as our safety and productivity solutions, our building technologies business, and even many segments of Aero, we're seeing increased demand on our products and services. And it's really been the trend all year long. So the demand side is about as strong as we hope it would be, and that continues to be a very positive story. And I think what's particularly great for Honeywell is that many of the sustainability solutions, which have always been part of our fiber and makeup, are even accelerated demand. So whether it's some of our energy-oriented solutions, our transition solutions as we transition to a much more sustainable energy future, those are particularly high demand.
So what are those specifically? What products that you offer are seeing this elevated demand?
I would say probably the first set of solutions and offerings is in our green fuels. I mean, we've had about 4 or 5 wins just in the last 2 months. And those range for green jet fuel, green diesel, that conversion of the energy footprint. And many of our current, as well as some new customers, are really relooking at their whole asset footprint in terms of how they need to remake themselves and be relevant energy of the future. And that's actually terrific for us, because some of our businesses like UOP and PMT, our Performance Material Technologies business, we've really known these customers for decades. But they also have the technologies to help them transition to the future. So whether it be our green fuels portfolio, whether it be plastics recycling. We just recently signed a deal with a company called Saker in Europe and Spain specifically to recycle plastics and use that as feed to our current customer set. We're doing research in partnership with many of the utility players to help them provide economically viable energy storage. So we're kind of seeing this across the board. And the nice thing is that we have such a wide range of solutions for sustainability. There isn't what we do, and probably add hydrogen to that portfolio as well, both in terms of blue and green hydrogen as well.
What is the difference looking like in demand between hydrogen and some of those other green fuels you're talking about?
But I would say that hydrogen is probably a little bit more in the future. However, there have been over 300 projects announced. There are startups in China and other places for hydrogen. So we think that is a kind of a midterm bet. But the green fuels technologies, whether it be SAF, whether it be green diesel, those technologies are here, they're now, they're proven, and they're available. And we've had those technologies for decades. And the great news for us is we've actually dismantled this business unit probably in the year 2014 and 2015, because we've had the technologies, but there was very, very little interest. And so we were a little bit ahead of our time in terms of what the customers needed and wanted. And now we just see huge demand in terms of these sustainable solutions. I mean, we just recently signed the biggest SAF deal of all time with United Airlines and Elder Technologies and all partnerships to really create sustainable jet fuel. And I think that this is just beginning. I mean, we have a few more in the queue, and this is going to continue to be much, much aggressively growing part of our business. So it's great to finally see.
What do you think the catalyst was for this surge in demand?
Well, there's a number of things. I mean, certainly a much greater focus both on the parts of government and society in general to have much greater level of sustainability for the planet. I mean, I think that we've seen that trend really initiate in the 17-18 timeframe, and it's just taking off. So if we think about ESG and its impact on the world, business environment, I would say it's been accelerating ever since really 2018. And I would say that acceleration isn't linear, it's exponential. And for us, for Honeywell, that's a great thing because this is a company that's all about controls, automations, energy savings, sustainability, and energy solutions. So we've welcomed this transformation. And now with COP26, and we see that that's going to continue to accelerate because there's some level of alignment that all countries in the world will do something and they will transform to a carbon-free economy.
Yeah, obviously it's a massive effort to solve what is a massive problem. Do you find that you have adequate solutions for it at this time, or are there things that your customers would like to see in an effort to meet whatever green goals they have set, whether it's carbon neutrality, you name it? Are the solutions there?
Well, the good news for us is that most of the solutions we actually have today, there are a few that we're working on. I'll point out a couple of very specific examples. I talked about green fuels. Those solutions are there. We co-invented or invented many of these green fuel solutions a couple of decades ago. So they're actually, we've enhanced them and upgraded them since then. But, we were one of the real innovators in this area. So those solutions are there. Things like carbon capture, things like, hydrogen. I mean, we've created a hydrogen and refining environment called gray hydrogen for a very, very long time. Now we're doing it a little bit differently through the use of gas and converting that to hydrogen and then capturing the carbon, which is really all about blue hydrogen. Those solutions we have, they're available. They're here today. They're there. Carbon capture, Wabash Valley, another project that we recently signed, the biggest North America carbon capture project, where we have those technologies available. So in majority, and then plastics recycling, which I gave her an example for earlier. So many of these technologies are there. There's a couple that we're still doing research on. Fuel cell battery. That's one is more in the R&D phase of things. And we have a couple of customer partners that we're iterating with. But that's really going to unlock the potential for using solar, wind energy, and having long-term energy storage at a viable economic price point. So that technology is still in development. But for the most part, most of these sustainable technologies are out there, and we know how to do this.
Yeah. Well, Darius, as we know, it's not just about the existence of the technology, it's about the ability to scale it. Is scalability up to par at this point? Can you get enough of this technology out there for it to start making a substantial difference?
Well, the good news is that, as I said, the takeoff seems to be exponential, and it's particularly see it on green fuels. We see it in plastics recycling. So we're very encouraged as we head into 22 and 23, both by the business we've already captured, as well as the pipeline of new business that we have. And we're growing, we're scaling up, we're expanding, and like I said, demand. I don't think demand is going to be our issue here for the next few years. Probably going to be more scaling of the issue. So probably like many other companies, we're kind of battling some of the supply chain challenges, some of the people hiring challenges, but we're managing through that, and I'm confident we're going to figure out a way how to meet the demand that's in front of us.
I'll come back to those supply chain challenges in a minute, but anything that's scarce or when demand is really high, a lot of times that means the price goes up. Do you find that the more sustainable option is often the more expensive option for your customers?
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But the good news is many of the global governments understand that when you try to catalyze something new and different in sustainable forms of energy, there is going to have to be some level of government interjection, whether it's in tax breaks or incentives or whatever that may be. And I think the good news is the global governments understand that. I mean, you can't scale something without being able to catalyze it. Now, some of these technologies have economics which are already compelling. Others will probably need a little bit of a boost. But the good news is, I think with the proper level of government stimulus, we're going to get to these new technologies. So I think depending on the technology, some of them are at economic viability, others still have a little bit of a ways to go.
So that's on the cost side for your customers. What about on the side of spending at Honeywell? I know about 50% of your R&D goes toward ESG-oriented products and solutions. Do you foresee that share growing in the years ahead as you say, you are seeing this heightened demand?
Yeah, it's 50% today, and I have no doubt that that percentage is only going to go up because some of our most sustainable business units that are getting a disproportionate part of the investment, internal investment. Our sustainability technology solutions business, which really houses all these energy-oriented technologies, that business we're investing in very, very aggressively. Quantum computing, believe it or not, is very much a sustainable business because one of the things that the world needs today is very fast molecule research for pharmaceutical applications. And there's no better device to use in the world than a quantum computer because it can dramatically reduce the amount of time to perform research. So we're investing big dollars in that. And some of the other solutions, such as our healthy buildings offering. So as people are traveling more, so whether it's airports, office buildings, stadiums, we want to make sure that people are breathing clean air, but doing that at energy costs, which is viable. And so those are just some examples of businesses that we're really investing in aggressively to make sure that they have those sustainable solutions available.
Well, Darius, let's pick up on that buildings point, because at the same time, corporations are grappling with how to get greener, how to reach their net zero goals, their sustainability goals, whatever it is. They are also dealing with a global pandemic and navigating how to navigate that with their workforce and bringing them back to the office. And I know you at Honeywell just opened your headquarters, your new headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina, about 2 months ago. How did you navigate that and making sure that the building was healthy and safe for your employees to be in, but that also it was energy efficient?
Sure. Well, first of all, as you can imagine, because this is a brand new headquarters, we have all of the greatest and latest technologies here in the building itself, whether it's the UV treated air circulation. We have an occupant application, make sure that there's proper social distancing and so on. So we wanted our employees to feel as safe as possible returning to work. It is something that I think is going to be very, very relevant for employees, and we deployed all of our range of technologies. We also employed all of our controls technologies to optimize HVAC, lighting, boilers, all these items which consume a tremendous amount of energy, really optimizing them around the organization. We also put in a very visible building control center, which gives you in real time visibility to not just your energy consumption, your occupancy, your social distancing, level of usage of the space to optimize that, drive lighting controls, all of that is integrated in one place. So, frankly, our employees were thrilled to return to the workplace because they saw a place that's very contemporary, very safe. We wanted to see their colleagues again. And I think that there's been a lot of energy to actually be in the workplace again. And I think that that's been a very, very positive thing for us. And frankly, people are starting to become a bit tired of just working from home. They want some level of personal, I'd call 3D interaction rather than 2D interaction with others. So it's actually been pretty well received.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have Zoom fatigue, Darius, but you mentioned there that you had the luxury of starting from scratch. You were building a brand new building. For companies with existing buildings, how easy is it to make them healthier, to make the air cleaner, and also to make them more energy efficient in a pre-existing building that may be older?
Yeah, and by the way, that is, I would say 80% or 90% of the work that we're doing right now is in existing businesses. And whether it has Honeywell building controls or that of others, it doesn't really matter to us. We have solutions which are ubiquitous, and they operate on Honeywell building controls of that or any others. And right now, 80 to 90% of the work we're doing is really retrofitting. So that's sort of the more standard work. And whether we talk about educational facilities, whether we talk about airports, office buildings, I said most of the work that the products and services are really meant to be retrofitted into existing buildings.
And so you found, whether it's through these upgrades, investing in other technology, that companies are willing to deploy capital to do this. The CapEx is there.
The
Not
CapEx
just in terms
is
of
there.
buildings, but generally.
Sure. I think everybody has the same desire, which is whether they're your customers or your employees, you want to keep them safe. You want to create an environment which is safe for them. I mean, there's COVID hesitancy, and that's completely understandable. And the more that CEOs, that airport CEOs, that stadium owners can do, really welcome back in crowds in a safe environment, whether it's through their own funding or in some instances there's stimulus funding available for educational facilities, they're investing in this. And I think that that's admirable, because if we're ever going to return to normal, we have to provide a path which is kind of thoughtful and planned. And have to understand that people will have hesitancy in anything and everything we can do to minimize that hesitancy. I think that's what we need to do.
Well, you mentioned the return to normal there, Darius. Something else that the return to normal, or at least the recovery in demand, has brought are those supply chain challenges that you were talking about earlier. And I know on your earnings call last week, you addressed them, saying that you do expect it will have an impact early in 2022, that you're increasing prices in order to offset some of those higher input costs on the supply side. But when you think about your supply chain and navigating it through these kind of uncharted waters, given the shock that we're in right now, do you see ways in which you can make it more sustainable as you move forward?
Yeah. Well, some of the supply chain challenges are real. The inflation challenges are real. Obviously, we're trying to get ahead of all those. We saw that in Q3. We're obviously seeing it in Q4, but we're managing it. We knew that was here, and that we knew it was planned. But I think the way to make it a bit more sustainable and less risky for us to operate is actually very consistent with the way Honeywell has operated for many years, which is we believe serving from a local for local perspective. So let's say the North America market is served predominantly from North America. The China marketplace is served predominantly from China. I think when you start sort of shipping across oceans and so on, and not only is that less sustainable, but it also adds risk to your operating rhythm. And frankly, we've had a strategy that, if anything, we reinforce to be much more local for local. So although we are facing challenges and we're not immune, probably facing less challenges than most. I think in some areas like semiconductors and so on, that there's just a mismatch between current capacity and demand. And then we'll just take some time to work itself out. There's probably no magical solutions to change that. But I do think a more of a local for local approach from a supply chain manufacturing perspective has been very helpful to us.
And that would make the supply chain greener as well?
Right, because if we think about just the distances, whether it's travel over oceans or air freight, and the energy required to move goods, the shorter distances you have to travel, the less freight you need to use. Obviously, the less carbon you have to burn to get there. So I think anytime you can have a very closely knit supply chain in proximity, it actually very much helps in terms of generation of the carbon footprint, reduction of the generation.
Well, and of course, by nature of the supply chain, Honeywell has suppliers which supply your company with goods. Do you feel like you have transparency on the carbon footprint of your suppliers? I know internally at Honeywell, you probably have a pretty good grip on what the footprint looks like of your company, but does that trickle down the chain?
Well, that is something that we're that is something that we're incorporating much more in terms of the selection of our suppliers, which is we're looking at their sustainability strategy. What are they doing to become to have a lesser carbon footprint. What is their strategy? That is part of the selection criteria that we're using much more and more as we pick our suppliers. I mean, one of the things that we're very proud of at Honeywell is that we've reduced our carbon footprint in the last 15 years by over 90%. So I think we have a lot of credibility when it comes to saying we're going to be carbon neutral by 2035, because it isn't something new. It isn't something that we're inventing because it's a fad. We're doing it because we have a track record of actually doing it for a decade and a half. And because we've demonstrated it, because we know it's possible, and because we've done it, we believe we have the right to ask the same of our suppliers. So I can tell you that it's very much part of the criteria we use in selecting and retaining our supply base.
Do you have that same or a similar kind of criteria for your customers on the other end?
We do, and the good news is that our customers are aligned with us. I mean, it's probably a little bit easier on the customers because we serve a lot of tier one, blue chip customers, and the good news is this is not a new revelation to them. They're very much on the sustainability path. I mean, we talked about some very specific things we're doing with our customer base around green energy and so on. So the good news is for us, it's not as if though we have to spend a lot of time and effort to convince them. They're already there. And if anything, they're pushing us to bring them solutions faster and newer solutions where they have gaps, like the batteries that we talked about before. So we're very much aligned with that of our customers, but I can tell you the good news that they're very much already there.
And finally, Darius, last question, given that there is a financial focus at this Bloomberg Sustainability Summit, would you ever consider issuing green bonds?
It's frankly not a subject that we've, talked about, but it's probably, would I ever consider it? Of course. I think, we are a company that's open to considering anything. And if it's something that's both helps the world become much more sustainable, renewable, as well as makes financial sense for us, we would certainly consider it. We're not a company that's not well funded, and we have an extraordinarily strong balance sheet. So I wouldn't say it's a immediate need for us. But if it in some ways kind of helps the world be much more sustainable, it's certainly a consideration.
All right, Darius Adamczyk, CEO and Chairman of Honeywell, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.